G'day, I'm Sharyn. A friend of mine started a quilt using my Quilt As You Go method a few years ago. She had got to the point of having all of the squares completed, and she'd done some that were my designs from my 100 design set, and also some that were built-in designs from her machine and designs from elsewhere, and had made a whole bunch of 20 centimetre or 8-inch squares and some sashing to go with it. Unfortunately, it's got to the point where she's unable to carry on making it. Recently, I offered to finish it for her, and this is what it looked like when she gave it to me. It turns out that unfortunately she didn't have sufficient of the fabric to do the taping over all of the bits of this quilt. And when I tried to buy fabric to go with the fabric she'd already used, the pink fabric she'd already used, I found myself in a situation where I had to buy it all and take off what she'd done because I just could not get anything that even matched closely. So my first job was to take off all of the tape that she'd put onto the quilt. Additionally, when she made the squares, she had not put any backing fabric on them. So the back of the quilt was just the wadding. We managed to locate the piece of fabric that she had bought to be the backing for her quilt, and that was the first thing I needed to do. Get the back of the fabric, that backing fabric, attached to the quilt. And I forgot to film anything about that. I used my big quilt frame and I basted it on. Most people do not have big quilt frames that enable them to do the basting that way. So how would you do it? Probably by using a quilt basting spray. Make sure you do it somewhere outdoors or where there's plenty of air moving around, and follow the directions carefully. The idea is to get that backing fabric attached to the quilt so that it's not going to move while you do the taping. The tape maker piece that I'm going to use is to make 3/4 inch tape, and to do that I need to make my cut pieces of fabric 1.5 inches, so twice that amount. This particular quilt needed 14 pieces in one direction and 10 in the other, so 24. It happens to be an almost square quilt, so they're all the same length, and 24 times 1.5 inches used up 36 inches, so I used most of a piece of fabric the length that I needed for making this, just for making the tape. I also needed extra for doing the binding. With the tape all cut, I had to run it through the tape maker. I am not associated in any way, shape or form with Simplicity Bias tape makers, but I've had one for the best part of 20 years. I had to borrow a tip for doing the 3/4 inch pieces of tape because I didn't have one of those. Thanks Catherine for loaning it to me, and it's really quite an easy process. While I'm waiting for the tape maker to heat up, I'm going to just cut corners off these. These machines get exceedingly hot under here, and we're going to have to go under there to make it operate. Take the piece off, feed the pointy end into the tape maker. I'm just going to use a nice blunt screwdriver to push it through, making sure that it's in there fairly evenly. I don't need to get too head up about it. Place this piece back in the machine, pull it to the left and up. That bit there is incredibly hot. It's an iron. I'm going to take this through and press run. The tape is coming out of the other end of it, quite hot, and that is how hard or easy it is to make 3/4 inch tape. When I'm using the machines, I don't bother to wind the fabric onto something to come off onto it. As long as you've got it fairly straight, it will just feed in. I generally am using cotton fabric because most of the time I'm doing things to do with quilting. If you're going to use this for bias tape making, recognise it's possibly going to melt some things, and although you do have control over how hot it is, you need to be careful because the last thing you want to do is to melt a pile of polyester into your machine. I managed to forget to film when I was putting the horizontal tape into place. It is done exactly the way that I describe in version 2 of my Quilt As You Go, and as I'm stitching it on, it is stitching on the backing of the fabric. If you are doing something like this that is a big quilt and it's all together and you're trying to apply tape all the way across it, wind up or roll up 1/2 to get yourself to the middle. So I'm going to be doing somewhere around here first with this wound up into my machine, and I will put the tape there and then go further out, and when I've got that done I will turn the whole quilt around and do it in the other direction. So I never need to have more than half of the quilt in that area between the needle and the harp space of my machine. I am choosing to use my largest machine because I want it to be the least amount of annoying as possible, but that's the way you do it regardless of what size your machine is. You only ever need to put half of the quilt into that harp space. I have my needle set up 1mm away from the left side. I'm not worrying too much about where this goes. I know it's actually been cut a bit narrow for this tape, but it's not going to hurt. So I'm just going to place it down and I'm keeping the edge of the tape at the foot, or more to the point, I'm keeping the edge of the foot at the edge of the tape. So once I've decided where the tape is going, I just keep that foot near it. I'm using a fairly long stitch at 4mm, but because this is heavy, the machine doesn't really want to pull it along. It would probably work better for me to have a walking foot on here doing this, but I haven't put it on. That one there, she's put a design and it was a bit small for the square, so she put one of my border designs around it. I'm pretty sure that Catherine digitised the geese. Now I go back to the beginning of this piece of tape. Move my needle over so that it is 1mm from the right, and in my particular case I've got my machine set up for that to be a favourite stitch. And now I can just carry on. I completed the vertical taping and I've put the binding around, although I've not yet stitched it to the back of the quilt. The sashing lines that go across this quilt have added the best part of 30 centimetres to its length. And that's something to think about if you want to do things quilt as you go. Or simply putting all the way around the edges sashing pieces finishes off a quilt. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's certainly been a labour of love for me, for my friend, and I'm glad that she's going to have the completed quilt. I shall see you next time.